Grand Rising, everyone. Natalie coming to you live, spreading coffee. Got my coffee here. hmm All right, let's get started. Let's see, Brandon's here. He's coming on. We're going to invite. Boom. Simple. Now, question is, why can't everybody get it that quickly? Just kidding. Uh, I've had guests on here that just, and it's hard for them to figure it out, but you're a tech guy, so I guess you get it quickly. I know. Crazy. So, first of all, first things first, how did you sleep?
Slept well. I slept many more hours than usual.
Oh, good. You know what? I had this weird dream. Okay, I just have to just, we're just going to talk about this because consciousness, right, is really kind of, I try to say this is spiritual alchemy. You talk about spiritual alchemy, but consciousness is a big part of that. And dream work, right? Like dreams. And I had the weirdest, I don't know if you've ever heard this or if you've ever, I don't know, but I dreamt that I was in a cartoon. Like I was a cartoon. I don't know. It was I have never. Okay, look, here's the deal. I dream and I have dream recall, like my dream recall super high. So I remember all my dreams, like every morning since I was a kid. It's just crazy. It's almost too much to process. And I took a class in dream analysis, and I told the professor like, "There's no way I'm ever going into dream work because I cannot. I would spend a lifetime just trying to analyze one dream." So I told her it's just too much. Okay, so last night I had kind of woke up and then I fell back asleep again, and I went, of course, went into REM, and all of a sudden, boom, I was a cartoon and in a cartoon. It was the weirdest. Never have I ever dreamt that I was a cartoon. Weird. It's just weird.
Was it was everything else a cartoon?
Yes, everything. I was a cartoon in and it was kind of scary. I was like, I don't want to be in this cartoon. Weird. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up because things are strange and I don't know if my brain what's going on with my brain or my processing. Um Probably because I'm thinking of alternate universes at this point and I don't know. Like, okay, so I do have a question. I know we went into like a lot of the judicial and it was super helpful. The Supreme Court, like how things operate. I'm still confused on a lot of things. But it did help me to at least see other perspectives and then because I don't for me it's like I don't want to judge people. Like that's not my thing. I don't want to sit here and be like you should think this way or that way. I want to understand why people think the way they think. Like why do you think that? Because there could be things that I could learn from them and there's things that they might be able to learn from me, but arguing doesn't get us there. And so it's like, I was thinking about it and I was like, you because I'm not going to agree with everything you say, Brandon. I don't agree with every single thing you say, but I understand why you think the way you think and you make sense. Where most people just, I don't know, they're just saying things because, like you said, it's groupthink. They just want to follow the crowds and the masses, and they just, they say these random things, and I'm like, well, why do you think that way? Why are you, what's making you think that way? What facts or what are you pulling from in order to come up with that analysis? And I think that's part of like critical thinking, and really being able to stand in like what you believe to be true, but not just like you said, not just based on this is my truth, but like having some critical thinking in there, some rationale, like being able to say, well, here's why I think this way, and have critical thinking. So tell me what you think about that.
Okay, so first of all, I think, and I may have touched on this yesterday. I know it's a subject of mine that I hit on a lot.
Yeah.
Judgment is the foundation of civilization.
Uh-huh.
So when you say like, well, I don't want to judge others, well, that can be very destructive to civilization. What I mean
Mhm.
by that is if you're not willing to make an assessment of other people's ideas, of other people's actions, then we have no basis for civilization. That is
Mhm.
the very foundation of civilization, is our capacity to assess, you know, quote unquote good from bad ideas, quote unquote good from bad actions, right?
Mhm.
Like somebody just without reason murders someone, right? Well, I
Mhm.
don't want to judge, well, no, you do want to judge. Otherwise we can't have civilization.
Mhm.
If you don't judge that, like, yeah, no, we shouldn't be murdering each other for no reason, then there's no foundation for a civilization, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of my position on judgment. And I had mentioned it yesterday that even when I talk to many Christians, like they point to scripture that says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged," as their interpretation of that is, do not judge others. And
Mhm.
my interpretation of that is, no, you don't judge others on values and principles that you don't hold yourself to,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So like if I'm making judgments based
Mhm.
on values or virtues or principles, well, these judgments that I make of others' actions, ideas, and whatever, I must be willing to also shine the light on my own actions
Mhm.
and ideas and be willing to judge myself by those same standards.
Mhm.
So it's actually really important, and so is argument. Argument is actually an important way of synthesizing better ideas. Um, we argue, you know, by taking a position, asserting our position, someone else having a counter position and asserting their position, and like I talked about yesterday with how we ground assessments. Well, this is the opportunity to take someone else's input as grounding for another position and to ground your position. You actually, through argument, you will, multiple things can happen. One thing that can happen is that you could change your position because you're like, you know what, that's a good argument.
Mhm.
Arguments aren't a bad thing.
Yeah.
Just like anger isn't a bad thing. Anger is something that spawns action. You know, if you
Mhm.
have if you are angry about what is happening, what people are doing, that's actually a good thing because it's going to elicit some form of response from you.
Mhm.
So, and it's the same with argument. Argument is actually a very powerful tool, and unfortunately, we don't really see much in the way of argument. We see just the spewing of nonsensical information, right? Or misinformation, disinformation. These aren't arguments. Argument is like what an attorney does, right? When you're in court, one attorney is forming an argument for their client, right?
Mhm.
Arguing for their guilt or innocence, right? So
Mhm.
that's what you're doing. You're arguing for your position, which
Yeah.
is only going to, like I said, either change your position, which isn't a bad thing. Like I've gotten some new information now through this argument, and I don't necessarily have the position I had at the beginning of the argument,
Right.
and vice versa. I may argue in a way that changes someone else's position on something, and actually an important part of human interaction and civilization is the argument the um, and the judgment, right? So
Sure.
I see those as two very important tools.
Right. And I think what I meant was not that I don't judge, because I agree with you about judgment. Like, there's discernment. We have to know too. Like, we're judging all
Right.
the time, obviously. I can feel when I'm like, nah, this is shady. I'm gonna go that way. That's a judgment call. But I mean in terms of like, and maybe it's not judgment is the word, but I seek to understand first, because I'm like, I don't know. I can't just assume. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just making assumptions about
Right.
what people think, because that, I mean, I think a lot of people, okay, again, so we'll go back to this Facebook post, right? Where people, so now I had better, like a better understanding, grounding, looked at the post and had different lens to look at it through, which was really good, right? Because then I was like, okay, people saying like, oh, you should move, and I'm like, that's not going to solve the issue, right? And so, it's like, telling me to move isn't going to change what's about to happen. I'm telling you guys to, like, wake up, see what's going on, um educate, instead of, and I'm not saying that it's not okay for people to go celebrate, but educate yourself what you're celebrating and understand that those rights and privileges can be taken away from us at any time. And if we don't actually wake up and understand that and start to see that, and I thought about a lot of the privilege you were talking about, and it's like true. It's like we live in this privileged time where everybody's comfortable and they just, it's like I don't know what's going to jar them into like waking up and saying, well, we've got to speak up and continue to fight for this so that we don't lose it because they're taking it from underneath us. And I think that's really what I was trying to say in that post, and didn't really have the words. And also everybody was just thinking it was about the, women and the Supreme Court, and I don't know what they were talking about. And I'm like, you guys, this is bigger than that. It's bigger. I'm trying to get people to understand this is bigger. It's not just one thing. This is a bigger thing. A bigger narrative is taking shape. And so, but it was at least easier for me to go back and communicate that, which was good. And I'm like, just helping me. Thank you. I really honestly, because like I said, I don't understand politics. I don't understand how it operates, and I'm not gonna speak to things I don't know. Like, I just don't know. Um,
Right.
but I have a better understanding now. So, yeah, but I do agree with you in terms of like, yes, we do make judgments. And yes, arguments are good when, okay, so do this because I know that you talk a lot about like being able to take a position, arguing, feedback, all that kind of stuff, because I think people like, especially with communication, have issues with have issues with communication, right? And
Right.
so go ahead and give me your insight for that, or what.
Well, this is yeah, I agree with you. This is often a problem that
Uh-huh.
um, that obfuscates any kind of meaningful conversation. And the way we do this, and this goes back to that subject I brought up yesterday about relativism.
Mhm.
People who sit in this, well, that's my truth, that's your truth. No one goes anywhere under
Mhm.
relativism,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because the basically the general premise is that any idea is as valid as any other idea. That's
Mhm.
relativism. And
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
not necessarily so. So we must be able to make distinctions in our language. So, I brought up the speech acts yesterday.
Mhm.
Like an assertion is something that can be proven true or false. So it's either factual or it's not, right? And so when you realize that you've got assertions, right, that can be proven true or false,
Mhm.
then you can use assertions, facts, to support your assessments, because assessments are these opinions, these judgments that have no factual basis.
Mhm.
It's something like, that action is bad or wrong, right? That's an assessment. That's not true false language. You can't prove it's good, or
Mhm.
you can't
Mhm.
prove it's bad, because that language, good, bad, is assessing, right?
Mhm.
It
Yep.
But I can uh, ground my assessment with
Right.
various assertions,
Mhm.
and I can gauge the merit of my assessment or another's assessment. And so, in communicating, like when I've mediated between two people, um, that's what I'll start to do. I'll start to pull apart their language and say,
Mhm.
okay, well,
Mhm.
that's an assertion. We can prove this true or false. That's an assessment, rather than this blanket statement of, oh, well, that's your truth and that's this other person's truth. Well, okay, there's no mediating there. You're
Yes.
stuck in your reality. They're stuck in their reality. We have no common reality. There is no absolute truth. There is no absolute morality. It's just this wishy washy world, this wishy washy
Mhm.
reality where
Mhm.
nothing can be established.
Mhm.
So that's, to me, that's very unproductive. You can't, there is no human relationship in that space, because it's what you eventually have is everyone living in this isolated reality, and we can't share principles. We can't share values because we live in completely different realities, and we won't acknowledge the merit of our ideas or the merit of another's ideas, or the
Mhm.
lack thereof, right? Whether an idea lacks merit or So it's important to be able to make distinctions in your language, right? And of course, there's other forms of the speech acts that I've taught where it's like, okay, there you can make a request. There are three ways for someone to respond to a request, right? And so there are understanding these elements of language and being able to make distinctions of the language and understanding up front,
Mhm.
like I can, like, again, a presumption or assumption of a lot of people is if I make a request, it must be honored. Like, well,
Yes.
that's very, very narcissistic of you, but no, nobody must honor your request. You can make the request and they can choose to accept or honor it, or they could choose to reject it, or they can choose to counter offer on it, meaning, okay, I see that you have an end in mind and I want to work with you to get to that end, but I see we can approach this in a different way. That's your counter offer, right?
Hmm.
So there in understanding this, right? So that when someone makes a request of you, you know that it's not I must honor or I must reject.
Hmm.
It's like, well, okay, I see you have an end in mind. Is there a way that I see that's more palatable for me to get there? And I
Yes.
can make the counter offer. So that there's these important elements of language that when we're clear on these distinctions, conversation, communication can become much more effective. Right? I don't know if you remember this. I did a whole course on effective communication
Oh yeah,
just
absolutely.
using those tools.
Yep. And that I think that was so for me, I still use it and I love distinctions. I swear, like the language piece was for me was the biggest one because like the collapse distinctions and understanding that because if it's like before okay, so before I took all these classes, right? Leadership and all that stuff with you, I didn't have the language to describe my experiences. Like I just didn't have the language. And I would try to tell people, but it would end up in arguments. And I'm like, no, I just didn't have the words. I didn't have the right words, or I wasn't able to see that there was what you call collapse distinctions. Okay, so after, right, everything, I started to say, oh, it's the language I'm using. That's where the disconnect is. And
Right.
now I'm telling you, it's a game changer. I even tell people about it on here. Like,
Oh,
understand
nice.
language. Yeah, oh yeah. I still use a lot of the tools, like a lot of the tools, and they work. And that's why and then I tell people, this works. It actually works. You know what I mean? It's true. Even all of the like the living vision statements and all that stuff that we did, I do that every like the first of the year, not even the first, like just yesterday, I'll sit there and I actually do that process. And I'm like, it works. When you apply it, it actually works. And I think, and I try to get, I teach it on here. I tell people all the time, um, but language is the big thing. And then, of course, there's a rabbit hole of language we talked about yesterday, which is symbols, and then how those symbols are creating the narrative. And of course, in consciousness studies, that's what it's about, right? It's like, how do these shapes and symbols and even the archetypes or the energy or the patterns or the fractals or whatever it is that we're living in, how does that like shape the way that we see the world and how we communicate it? And that right there, I think is powerful. And trying to get
Right.
people to, really understand like we, the consciousness itself is shifting. Like paradigms are shifting, right? I know you talk about paradigms, but paradigms are shifting and we're transitioning into something different and people are still holding on to the old stuff. And part of it is like, yeah, like you said, things are changing. They're not going to be the same because we're shifting into a whole new way of seeing the world and engaging in the world. And so it's
Right.
going to be different. And the language is going to change. Language is going to, I mean, we have a whole tech language now that wasn't there before.
Right.
We're recreating tech language and all these things, but it is the language where so tell me how you think talk about or if you want to like misdirect with language. Like how do you feel they're using misdirection with language to keep us in a trap narrative? What do you
Well, there's, yeah, that's actually something that all human beings do,
think?
consciously or
They just
unconsciously.
trap you in their narrative?
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny, like if you listen carefully to people, like people actually have a really hard time lying. So they're very they very skillfully, whether it's subconscious or not, structure their language in a way that they try to avoid lying, but they're trying to deceive, right? And so this is happening all the time. I mean, if you want to see it in action, just turn on mainstream television
Oh my God.
and watch the news for a little while, and what you'll see is people artfully and skillfully deceiving through language, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, you've heard the saying, like, well, it's not what they say, it's what they don't say, right? And that is an important distinction. Like, they will avoid saying certain things, and then they use really general terms. So it's this way of deceiving through select use of language. And it's funny because deep down, I believe, deep down,
Mhm.
everyone has some values, right? And some principles, whether they're conscious of them or not. There are these absolutes. Again, I'm not a relativist. I do recognize that there is relativism and that
Mhm.
we have relative perspectives, but I'm not a relativist, meaning I do see and believe in an absolute truth, right?
Mhm.
That there is an ultimate truth. I don't think
Sure.
it's easy for us to express it. In fact, I believe it's practically impossible to express the truth,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
or to know the truth, right? Because
Mhm.
again, there's this layer of separation of interpretation through, symbolic representations like language and other things. But it's deep down, everyone has some kind of connection to a morality, an absolute morality, where it's
Mhm.
like, and we have within our culture certain idiosyncrasies of uh, the idea that right from wrong,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And on some level, I do believe that. Um, Now, again, I do also believe that we can very easily cut ourselves off from knowing right and wrong, right? Or right from wrong, or good from bad. And especially if our own actions are wrong or bad, or our own ideas are wrong or bad based on our own judgment, based on our moral code, what we'll do is we will even use language to justify our own positions, to justify our wrongness, to justify our badness that we have a judgment on. And so this forms guilt within people. And right now, you're actually seeing the exploitation of guilt within
Mhm.
people. So you
Mhm.
have ideologies that are specifically designed to exploit the inherent guilt in human beings. All human beings have guilt,
Mhm.
because we can all look back and say, yeah, I could have handled that better. you know,
Yeah.
like like there's definitely a better way I could have handled that. So on some level, subconscious or conscious, we have an idea of where we've gone astray from our principles, from our
Uh-huh.
values. And
Mhm.
so we have this inherent guilt that we carry around with us. And like I spoke a little tiny bit on the critical theories yesterday, but critical race theory is one of those ones that is specifically designed to exploit that guilt. Okay. So the people who buy into it have guilt that is being exploited, right?
Okay.
Um, so that's a tool. You can exploit the guilt in others. And in fact, I'm sure you've had relationships with people in your life where they attempt to manipulate you by by exploiting your guilt about something, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
It's called family.
Exactly. They're the best at it. They're the best at it because they understand it more than anyone, right? That's why family can always push your buttons better than anyone, because
Yeah.
they understand you at a deeper level. So they can exploit you at a deeper level and more effectively than others can exploit you. So yes, we've definitely seen this with family, where family will hook you and try to exploit your guilt around something to manipulate you to get you to do what they want you to,
Okay. So
right?
from critical race theory, can you give an example of what they're like,
Um,
maybe what it looks like?
yeah, like how they use guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very simple. It's racism against white people, where they're trying to make all white people feel guilty of crimes that they did not commit.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I see
So
what
they're
you're saying.
exploiting
Kind of
that.
like,
And
yeah,
what I'm saying is these white people already have guilt. Okay. Now it's not about slavery because they didn't own slaves. They had
right.
nothing to do with slavery.
Uh-huh.
But you're exploiting guilt that they already have.
Right.
Okay.
And it's funny. Okay, so that's a good thing because I was kind of like, okay, well, how are they explaining? Okay, so I did do some seminars on equity, and and it was crazy. So we did have a bunch of people. We had, and it was great. We had a woman who was black. We had a woman who was white. We had a white man. I mean, we had like pretty much all the people you need to have in that kind of conversation.
Hmm.
And it was about diversity and exclusion in the workplace. So we were just talking about these different concepts. And for me, I of course, because I use experiential training, right, in my things, and a lot of the work that I still do a lot of the work, and I brought a lot of the transformational stuff into it because I was like, this isn't gonna, I'm not just gonna spew a bunch of stuff at these people. Like, there's not gonna be any change, any transformation. No one's gonna get anything out of it. They're just gonna leave and they're gonna still have their same beliefs. Like, we need to have a real dialogue. And then the guy that I was facilitating with was really scared because he doesn't know transformational work. And he's like, I don't know, Natalie. I said, just trust me. So, but it was really awesome because I said, I can't remember the word or the question that I brought up, right? Because I just had a bunch of questions to facilitate the conversation. And I think it was something like, um, how comfortable do you feel with this or that or the other? And the white woman, she stood up, but she was at least courageous enough to say, exactly how she felt. Like, she felt uncomfortable and she felt singled out and she felt like she didn't know what to say and she didn't have the words. And then the black woman came out and she started talking about how she felt like she never had a voice, and every time she does speak out, she's too loud. And so, but there was a healing between those two. And then there was a healing between uh the Native American woman and the white man because they worked together. And but we facilitated a real conversation where he was like, I've worked hard for what, it was the tip, it played out very typically. I've worked hard for what I've had, this and that and the other. And but they were authentic and they were honest and they didn't hold
Hmm.
back. And we created like this safe place for them to be able to express themselves fully without feeling like they were going to be ridiculed by other people, or that these other people were going to say, yeah, you're terrible for this, and everybody listened, and then at the end, everybody was like, they came to a common ground and they were able to like heal and feel like connected. I mean, it was pretty awesome. But
Right.
I do see that. And I think that that's part of it is people are not, they won't speak out. They'll just stay uncomfortable. And
Well,
I think they're
and you
scared
got
about
to
it.
see that there's that the push behind this. So again, the typical approach, right?
Yeah.
So if you typically go to, like, if you went to a not Beverly D'Angelo, what the hell's her name? Uh, I can't even think of her name. D'Angelo, the one who does the white guilt, or the white, oh, what is it? I'm now forgetting the names of her books, but gosh, it's
She's
just
not the one
escaping me right now.
she's not the lady who does the intersectionality stuff, is it?
Well, it's always in there. That's always part of it. But their approach is victim, right? They push victim upon everyone. Whereas I imagine in your approach, you're pushing empowerment, you're pushing
Absolutely.
responsibility. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes,
And
yeah.
so that's the complete opposite of
Yeah.
how most of these, at least these high, um, I almost want to call them celebrity, but these high profile theorists, right, who
Yeah.
are traveling around the country doing their workshops and seminars. Again, same subject that you're talking about.
Yeah.
However, what they're doing is pushing victim on everyone,
Uh-huh.
except for the white dude. Right?
Got it. Yeah,
The
they
white
are.
dude
I
becomes
agree.
the white dude becomes the only response. So it's funny because the supposedly the goal, right, is to lift up, right? people of color, people, minorities, women, things like that. But in reality, what they're doing is they're pushing everyone in the room down and lifting up the white guy, going, "You're the only one responsible."
Right,
That's the only person they're empowering in the room is the white guy,
right.
because they're like, "You're responsible. You're not a victim." And he's like, "Okay, I'm responsible. I'm not a victim. Everyone else is a victim and not responsible." Now, again, we talked about freedom yesterday, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm, mhm,
and you cannot separate freedom from responsibility.
mhm. Yes,
So if
I
you take away responsibility, you take away freedom.
yes. And it should be taken away. You have to act
Yeah.
responsibly, right? Um,
Yeah, you absolutely, they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
otherwise, forget it, we'd all be dead.
Yeah.
We wouldn't even exist right now as a species, right? Like, we'd be gone, wiped out, for sure. But yeah, I think you're right, and I think that we had the ability to change the narrative completely because I think so the person that I was working with, he used to work for the state and he was a high representative, but he was impressed. He was like, "I can't even believe it went that way." And I said, "Well, you've got to trust me. Like, I understand how to facilitate these things. I understand, done a lot of work. You know what I mean? I'm in a master's program right now in transformation and transformative studies and consciousness and in experiential training. And it's about the healing and it's about everybody being heard because these issues, like I tell people, it's not about the one individual. It's a bigger system that's in operation and and people can't see past that, their individual narrative. They think they're being singled out. I did read, I'll send it to you if you're interested, but I did read, and I don't know if you've heard of him, James Hillman. I don't know if you've heard of his work. um
Doesn't
I'm
sound
only
familiar.
starting to really look into his stuff. He was a protege of Carl Jung. Now I'm not 100% on the Carl Jung train, like 100%. And I'm not going to be a Jungian analyst, I mean, but he does talk about the archetype of white supremacy, which I think that his article was very, very, very eye-opening. It was just eye-opening because it was not about the individual, but more of the archetypal construct of it. And I was like, wow, this is powerful because what it does is it takes us to a bigger narrative of how this construct was created. And it's just very eye-opening. And I think James
Yeah,
Hillman's book.
I think a lot of that is absolute bullshit. And again, it's more of a victimization. It's about disempowering. You've got to be really careful, especially because you're in a university in your master's program. They're indoctrinating you. They're hardly
Absolutely.
educating you. You know what I mean? And they're indoctrinating you into this ideology. The the idea of quote
Mhm.
unquote institutional white supremacy or institutional racism, again, this is a invisible trope, right? It's just something you can't actually engage with and doesn't actually exist. Okay, now you said your conversation was on equity. In reality, human
Mhm.
culture is a complex system. If you're not willing to look at all the variables that contribute to someone's unequal outcome, that's what inequity is, then you're disempowering that person.
Mhm.
Okay. So, for instance, something that's always left out of these conversations because it doesn't fit the narrative, who are the most successful people in this country? And I mean, yeah, go ahead and use their group identity.
Well, from what I know, white
Yeah.
men.
Nope. Asian women.
Okay. Okay, tell me. Speak to me.
So per capita, when you take
Okay.
the number of white men in the country and how
Uh-huh.
many of them are successful, it's a much smaller percentage when you take Asian women. Asian women per capita make more money than any other group. They rise to higher positions within their organizations than any other group. But again, this is left out of the conversation because it doesn't fit the narrative of institutional white supremacy.
Mhm. Yeah, and I
Okay.
think so, and part of the it wasn't institutional white supremacy. I'll send you the actual article so you could read it, because it wasn't about institutions at all. It was about the bigger, it was about the archetypal stuff. Anyway, I'll send it to you and you can read it, and then you can tell me what you think. And I would
All right.
just, I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, because James Hillman, I think, was onto something at least. um and not excluding the white supremacy conversation, but he has a theory called like the acorn theory and all that. And you're right, it is indoctrination, but I do use discernment, right? And I don't agree with everything, and in fact, I'm the the troubled child, and my professors love me for it, right? Because I don't agree with everything that these people say, and I'm the one who's vocal about it. While other students are just going along with the narrative, I'm like, no, I don't agree with what they're saying. Oh, this is incorrect, and here's why. And they're like, thank you for pointing that out, and then they go into what they believe too. So I don't think all my professors 100% agree with everything that is being taught as well. And it's kind of interesting too, because the program that I'm in is not necessarily a typical program that people go into, because it is transformative as well. So they're
Right.
really, it is about like, how do we create these new narratives? They simply tell us nobody knows what the hell's going on at this point. Nobody
Yeah,
knows.
and
We don't know. We just don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
and the again, in the universities, you basically have neo-Marxism running
Uh-huh,
rampant,
uh-huh.
and so they will always point to the foundational elements of culture, because in order to bring about their communist utopia, you need to wipe out all institutions, all
Yeah.
cultural
Hmm.
elements. You just need to break it all down, and then they will build their communist utopia in its place. That's their belief, right? They don't even have a like a how to once they've destroyed everything. And this is
Yeah.
why every country that communism makes its way into is absolutely destroyed, and nothing great is ever built out of it.
Right.
Because they don't actually have a roadmap,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Of
Uh-huh.
like, because if they had a roadmap, we can at least assess it and go, okay, I see what you want to do here, and we can gauge it, right? We can judge the merit of their ideas, but they don't have any ideas. They don't know how. They just say, well, we got to tear down everything that exists, and then our communist utopia will arise. And so this is why, and again, this is a very disempowering conversation, because they point to things that you can't directly address. However, in the equity conversation,
Hmm.
the biggest contributing factors are culture. Okay, so now let's again go back to Asians. Why are Asians so successful?
Hmm.
Okay, because Asians culturally stay married, they have children that when they're married, they they reinforce values that they value education, so they take school serious. How many Asian friends do you have? How serious did they take school?
Yeah, it is true.
And so again, this is
Mhm,
cultural. So
mhm,
why do they excel in a culture? It's not because there's institutional racism in their favor. It's because of their culture. And like I
mhm,
said, human civilization is a very complex model. It's not something that you can say, oh, it's this one thing. That's why we
mhm.
have unequal outcomes. No.
Yeah.
In fact, the biggest contributing factor everyone's ignoring, which is culture. Okay.
Mm.
So
So you're
once you
saying that,
address the culture, what's
okay,
that?
I'm sorry, let me stop you. So you're saying that, and I don't know the research on the equity conversation fully, but so what you're saying is the narrative they leave out of that is culture.
Yeah,
Like culture is not
absolutely.
addressed within, okay. Okay, cool. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's not addressed at all, because
Okay.
then you would actually be have something that you can work with. That
Mhm.
it's like, oh, we want to raise up, whether it's blacks or Hispanics or any other group, right?
Uh-huh.
Any other of your group identities, you want to raise them up. Look at the culture,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And like if you look at even before the Jim Crow laws were eradicated, you had much more wealth and success in black communities. What was different? Culturally, they got married, they stayed married, and children were born to married couples. Okay. It was something like less than 20% In the black community, less than 20% of people were born to unwed mothers. Now that number is like 70 to 80%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you don't have a father in the home. That is a contributing factor. That is cultural. Okay. And if you don't address that, and it's like, well, why don't we have a father in the home? What's different here?
Yeah.
Right. And you look at the elements of poverty. That did you know that our welfare system rewards women for not marrying men?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
trust me. I understand that system well. Only because I have family members, right, who've been on that system for so long. And
Right.
yeah, and then they're just 100% dependent. Hey, Linga, how are you? Linga Lunga.
So what if rather than rewarding not married couples, we rewarded married couples in the welfare system?
Yeah, then it might
You know
change
what I
the
mean?
yeah, and then the
Yeah,
way
that's something you can actually work with. It's not an invisible boogeyman. It's
right.
it's statistical. We can look and we can say, look at where we have all the success, whether it's
Mhm,
financial success, whether it's relationship success, and you can pull out certain elements, cultural elements, and say, well, here's an interesting tie-in. Asians, one of the most successful groups in this country,
mhm,
also stay married more than any other group and have and raise children in a two-parent household.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
They do that more than anyone and they're more successful than anyone. Could that be a factor that we should look at and
Right,
address?
right, right.
Because that's something we can work with directly. See, but these charlatans, the Ibramex Kendis and and the D'Angelos, they're running around with no solutions. They're just saying they're pointing to an invisible boogeyman saying institutional.
Mhm,
And so we just need to tear down the whole system.
mhm.
That's not a solution. Okay.
Right.
It's not a
No,
solution.
I
It's not a
agree.
remedy.
It's
That doesn't
not.
empower anyone.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
again, they're not trying to empower anyone. They're
No.
selling everyone on being a victim.
Yes,
But it's like,
yes,
okay, if we're not going to sell everyone on being a victim, we're going to sell everyone on responsibility. And we're going to look at when and where we do have success. Like, again, even if you take the let's just take the whites and
uh-huh,
separate them, right? Let's separate whites who are born in single mother households versus whites born to two parent households, and you will see there's a dramatic difference in success, financial success, career success, relationship success of the people raised in two-parent households.
yeah, I agree.
It's it's not an
Mhm.
absolute, but it's
Right.
a huge contributing factor.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's important. So culture, I didn't know culture wasn't a part of the conversation and dialogue, but here's what I see with the Latinos, right? And this is a problem because we do talk about like race and all that stuff, and I've never saw myself as a victim to these things. Like I've done everything I've wanted, right? And I'm like I'm going all the way as far as I can. But I do see that when I like for instance, I went to something called the PhD project at one point and I just there was nothing but black people. It was for minorities and they were trying to get more minorities to get PhDs. So I said, "Okay, well let me go." So I went to the convention and there was like two Latinos there. And I'm like, "I don't understand this. Where are they?" And within our own culture, right? Because we could sit there and I tell people we could sit there and say it is the white narrative, all this and that. But the reality is we don't even come together and unify for ourselves. It's like our culture is all over the place. I don't even know. We fight amongst each other. We pull each other down. We don't lift each other up. We're not coming together with a common cause or anything like that.
Well,
I
it's
didn't.
it's it's interesting because you have to look at the subculture you're a part of too. Because look, I grew up in Southern California, and the Hispanic culture of Southern California is very different than New Mexico.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I experienced a very strange, very I won't say strange, a very foreign culture there. Like I was not, and again, I grew up just surrounded by Hispanics, Asians, and because of where I grew up, right?
Yeah.
And but it was a very different culture. The Hispanic cultures I experienced are very different than what you have in New Mexico. See, in New Mexico, you have these different cultures at odds with each other. You have what I call the old Spanish culture,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And they're very,
Yep.
we're not Mexican,
Yep.
right? Like
Yes.
you call them Mexican and you might get
Yep.
hit or
I
shot
know.
or
Yes.
something, right?
Yes.
They're
Very
like,
true.
no,
That's
we're
true.
Spanish,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And they're very racist towards natives and Mexicans, right?
Yes, they are. Yes. You're
It's
absolutely correct.
crazy. Like I was like, what the
It is
hell is
crazy.
going on here? Like it
I know.
blew my
Yes.
mind.
I know. It
And
does. It blows my mind. And I live here.
yeah, so that was different for me because again, I where I grew up, because I also grew up in Southern California, there's a high level of acceptance. So there's like you're not like, oh, I'm not playing with Hispanic kids. Yeah, right. Like you're playing with Hispanic kids, you're playing with Asian kids. Like in the community I grew up in, we had like three black families at our school. So it was like, okay, but you didn't like you wouldn't not play with them because of their color or because of
Right.
their heritage or because of anything else. We had Vietnamese, we had Cambodians, we had Laotians, we had a lot of Southeast Asians, right?
Right.
But there was this high level of acceptance from all groups, right?
Right.
Like not one group was isolating itself from another. We all just kind of played along, right?
Exactly.
And so there was this high level of acceptance. So when I moved to New Mexico many years ago, and I saw that, I was taken back by it because I wasn't used to it. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, this is interesting. You know?
That is the beautiful state of New Mexico. It surely is. You're in a nutshell correct, Brendan. That's the way it is here.
Yeah. And
And
so, but again, but that's cool. That now, look, if we want to make headway in New Mexico, we have to be willing to look at that. Like, look, you have many different cultures here. You know, because then you also
yeah,
have the affluent white community of like say you know most of them are concentrated in Santa Fe or the you know the high income areas of Albuquerque, and they've got their own culture. So you've actually New Mexico, and again, it's not like I'm this world traveler and been everywhere, but there's something very unique in that these it's pockets of culture that you must address each one. So it's like if they're a Mexican immigrant family, they're going to have a very different culture than the old Spanish
I
families, right?
agree. Yes, yes, they do. They do. But what I'm saying is I think that's the issue is that we as Hispanics, whatever you want to call us together because of that, we don't have a common culture. And it's not playing out. In other words, we're not helping each other out. We should be. I don't understand
Right.
why we're not. And it doesn't play out. And so it's like we don't have common values. We don't and it's like, oh no, it's almost like a status thing too, because it's like, oh, we're
Right.
Spanish. And I'm like, do you realize
Yeah.
what happened and what they did to this land? Like, do you guys not know the history? Like, why are you wearing that so proud? Like there was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of stuff that circulated from that, but people are very proud, I
Yeah, but
think here.
that's the thing. That's actually I can't wait because I don't know if you know this or not, but the Hispanics will be the next in the crosshairs after they've demoralized the whites. The next
Uh-huh.
target will be Hispanics because Hispanics are the next quote unquote power group, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yep.
in reality, uh, most Hispanics are descended of people from Spain. That is a European country,
I
right?
know.
So, you know you could claim I'm a brown person. Yeah, you may have. I'm a brown person. I have brown skin, but it doesn't mean a whole lot, you know. Um, it's they're going to look at your heritage, right? And that's like, oh well, you were conquerors. Now again, we're also sanitizing history and pretending like that wasn't the way of the world.
Yeah,
Everyone was conquering everyone. Like before the
yeah,
Europeans
true.
got here, natives were conquering the shit out of each
Yeah, yeah,
other.
yeah,
Okay,
yep.
like the Black Hills, right, where we
Mm,
built Mount Rushmore, right? In a short time from the 1600s to the 1800s, when we conquered the Lakota, five different tribes controlled that area, and each one conquered the previous one to
right.
control that area.
Uh-huh.
So it's not this unique phenomenon that
No.
Europeans brought about. Just like slavery wasn't a unique phenomenon that the Europeans brought about. Like in reality, slavery was a global phenomenon, like
Yeah,
since the beginning of time.
yeah.
Like as far back as prostitution goes, slavery goes back just as far.
It's like, we humans can't get over they're control freaks. No, I'm just kidding. They're freak
Well, I mean,
freaks and they're
here's
control
again
freaks.
when you look at, we were talking about when you're able to like zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Again, we're at an anomalous time. Like it's only
Yeah.
been 200 years that we've tried to eradicate slavery. Now it still exists in many parts of the world,
No,
but
absolutely.
it's not accepted, right? So these countries where it is still practiced, they kind of got to do it low key and under the table so that nobody notices that they're still engaged in slavery because none of the other countries will accept that, right? But that's the anomaly. Like you're talking about 10,000 years slavery was cool. And now for 200 years it's been not cool. Like again, the big picture, it's an anomaly. We're living in this
Right.
anomaly in history where there's not slavery, right?
That's kind of
Whereas,
true because, like, in India, you know what I mean?
yeah,
When I lived there, in I was freaked out. Like, for me, it was a very different thing. So, and especially because I'm American, right? And because I am light skinned. People think I'm white. Okay. So people
right,
are confused. Are you Latino or are you white? Latinos know I'm Latina, but when I go out to India, I'm white because I'm white.
right,
My skin is white.
right.
So,
You're
but it
you're
was,
you're Caucasoid enough,
yes, I am. And so I go out there and, we're in our flat or whatever, and then a maid comes in, and I'm like, and she's cleaning our stuff, and I'm like, "What do you do? Like, don't worry, I got it." You know what I mean? Like, and she's like, "No, no." I mean, and they come and they sweep and they do all the, and I was just like, I mean, for me, it was so weird, right? And then
right,
one of my friends has a maid that lives there with them. She, like, even sleeps on the floor, and I'm like, "Doesn't she wanna sleep on a bed?" Like, I ask these questions because 'cause I'm confused, like, I don't know, this is their culture, right? This is how they
right.
operate, and
Yeah,
I'm
and
like,
in their
"This is."
culture, you have
Uh-huh,
the untouchables, right? And
uh-huh,
it's like you're
uh-huh,
born
yes,
into that class and
yeah,
you can never
yeah.
elevate yourself out of
Yep,
that
yep,
class.
yeah, and so it was weird because I told her name was Aya, and I love her, she's such an amazing, I love her so much, but I would go in the kitchen and talk with her and stuff like that, and she would feed me from her hand, and I don't know, just beautiful, like, honestly, the most beautiful thing ever, and I even asked, "Well, do you have kid?" Like, she has kids, but she lives with this family. That is, I mean, it is slavery, it is. What am I to do? Like, that's not right. Like, I just have to go along with what they're doing, right? It's their culture. It's not my, but everywhere. And then there's, of course, the people on the streets. Yeah, the untouchables, the ones who are picking up trash where other people just throw their trash on the street. They don't like throw it in the trash can, could be right there, and they'll throw it on the street because they know someone's going to come pick it up. And I'm like,
Right,
wow, like for me, that was a big, so yeah, what I'm saying is, yes, there still is slavery. That is slavery. And then I was like freaked out by it, right? I was like, I don't worry, I got it. And I don't think that they ever experience that with many people,
right,
especially me, because I'm like, in my country, you guys think I'm white, and I'm not treated as white. I don't have a white last name, and so, I mean, I don't understand their struggles, but I understand, like, yeah, you're struggling. You know what I mean? I get it. So
right,
just it's an interesting narrative, but yeah. And I
right.
guess I never thought of it that way. Go ahead.
And I think the cap to put on any equity conversation
Mhm,
is meritocracy. Like in reality,
mhm.
America is supposed to be, and for the most part is, a meritocracy. What is that?
Yeah, what is it?
In like I'm a business owner, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to hire people based on their race. I'm going to hire people based on their competency, based on their
Yeah,
skills. I don't care what race you are. And
yeah,
in fact, that's how most business owners look at things because they want their business to be successful. They're not trying to be
right.
like some ideological beacon like I only hire white people. Nobody does that. Like, and if they do, they're not successful.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
know what I mean? Because you're only going
Yeah.
to hire based on skill level. You want the most talented employee. employees. You want the most talented group of people because that's going to make your business excel. And that's what you want as a business owner. So
Mhm.
this is already part of our culture is meritocracy. Now, we do have nepotism, meaning like, there's people like who are CEOs of huge multinational corporations, and they bring their nephew and their son in and give them these ridiculously high positions, and these kids are completely unqualified to do the job, right? That happens. And that
Right.
is not a meritocracy. That is nepotism. And so that does happen, but it happens few and far between. In fact, for every incompetent relative you bring in, you have to hire two really competent people that you don't know to make up for their lameness, right? Like it's just part of you realize that it's part of the equation. Factor it in.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. I kind of feel like I'm experiencing that at my job now.
Right. And you'll see it because people who do hire for ideological reasons, you're going to have, and again, I've seen this in no more pronounced than in New Mexico, because for one, you guys have this huge nonprofit sector, right? Of your, I mean, it's hard to call it business
Oh,
world, but
yeah.
like there's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of
Mhm,
nonprofit
mhm.
organizations in New Mexico, right?
Yep, yep,
And
yep,
they're
yep,
they're
yep,
mostly ideologically driven. So you have a lot of incompetence in these, and
yeah.
so like I would
Yes.
walk into these nonprofit organizations and I'm like, wow, I've never seen something so ineffective, you know?
I'm glad you're saying it. It's not coming out of my mouth, people. I mean, I've kind of said stuff, but
But
well, and
you could
two,
see
they say,
why I would interpret it that way.
"Oh, I do. I totally understand. Trust me." And it's a miracle that I'm still here in a lot of
Right.
ways because of that. You know what I mean? It's like, and then something that I do talk about, in New Mexico, and nobody wants to work. And when you get somebody like me who's all about the community and really doing the work, I get seen as the bad person and
Right.
go
Well, but you
away
know
because
why?
now you're going to call,
Because
yeah,
you're breaking the standard of
uh-huh.
mediocrity.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
if you
Absolutely.
excel, you make everyone else look
Yep.
bad.
Yep. And then that,
Yeah.
yeah, that happened. And they said that I was, um, what did they say? I forgot the word they used for me. That kind of like I'm a know-it-all. I'm like, I'm just asking questions here. You guys are just afraid to answer the questions.
Right.
Just be shit at life, Nat. So okay, so there's my friend Linga's on here. Lower your frequency and fit in, Linga. I know, right? I'm not gonna lower my frequency, and that's why I don't fit. It's hard. I was having this conversation with my friend the other day about moving because I do not fit here. I just don't, and I never have. And I spend all my time by myself mostly. A few friends I could talk to, most of them I call on the phone because they don't even live there. But it's hard to have these dialogues with people here because New Mexico is New Mexico, and it's not. I don't know if it's changing anytime soon. I don't foresee that happening. um but it's like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And what's keeping me here, right? And that's been the big question because it is the same thing and they're not going anywhere, and I'm just literally I'm a loner, right? It's just Natalie stays alone
Yeah.
mostly.
Like I said,
I don't really have anything to talk about with these people. I don't know what to talk about with them.
right. I mean, I'm from Orange County, which is predominantly a white part of Southern California. Um,
Yeah.
However, I've never experienced racism or xenophobia or anything like that like I did in New Mexico. Like
Yep.
I I
It's
had
it, it's
literally someone would hear my last name and be like, "Oh, you're not from here? Oh, we're not going to do business with you." I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before. Never had I seen that in
yeah,
California.
Brandon, don't take the money because it belongs in their pockets. Oh my god, I'm saying all this stuff on my live video. People from New Mexico to see it, be like, "What in the world?" Oh, there you go. It's said. It's the truth, though. It's the truth that are it's
Ah,
factual. Okay, that's speaking of facts. that these people, what you know, when you call them out and you do the work, it's yeah, it's a no-go. And they push you out, and then it's like people stay uncomfortable. They're getting fat
Yeah.
checks to do zero.
Yeah, I
They do
saw
nothing.
that.
They do
I
nothing.
saw I saw
I
so
know, and
much of that. I'm
it's
just like,
and
wow,
it
you guys have
so
got a pretty cushy thing going on here. Y'all stand around
they
all day
do.
doing nothing and you just get money, which comes from grants and donations and things like that. To
Yep,
just stand around and do
yep,
nothing all day.
yep.
Like
That's
it's like
it.
it's like
Yep.
if you get
That's
them to pull out a couple hours of
that's
work a month, yeah, like you're doing something right. Like it was again
I
it was
agree.
the strangest thing I ever seen. Because again, I'm not used to it.
Yeah,
I'm in Southern California for one. If you're going to have a business there, you have to be effective because it costs you so much to base your business there. So you can't just have
yeah,
people standing around like that. Ain't going to work.
yeah. Yeah,
You
nope,
know?
nope. You gotta hustle. You gotta hustle.
Yeah.
But there are a few pockets of people here who hustle, and that's who
Oh
I'm
yeah.
in conversation with at this point in my life because I'm like, I've got to change something. Part of me though does know that I need to move. And where that is, I have no idea. And perhaps that's a conversation you and I can have offline. Where's a good strategic place to move? I
Right.
need some strategies because I mean, I don't really know, especially when it comes to the political stuff and understanding how states, might operate in certain ways and all that kind of stuff. I don't really know. Australia. Yeah.
Oh, no way. You've
Linga,
never heard of
Australia.
Australia.
I know. Okay, so Linga is from Australia, and he's a really good friend of mine. He comes on here all the time. And he's been connecting with me for a long time. And I know he had questions about Australia. And I had mentioned you a long time ago, Brandon. Maybe I should read your cards for you, Nat. Yes, you can read my cards for me. I would love for you to read my cards. Australia is fucked. Oh, sorry, I just said the F bomb on. I said it. I'm on Facebook Live too. Sorry. Oops.
No,
Oops. Beep.
I would say that's a fair assessment. I agree with that assessment. And in fact, if you want, we can ground that assessment for the next hour about
Ooh,
how screwed Australia and Australians are.
yeah. Let's Y yeah, well, if you could go into if you know something about Australia, because I know he had been asking and stuff, and I was like, let me ask Brandon," but now he's on here, now Lingo's on here.
Well,
We're all,
I mean, we could point to the Western world in general. Okay.
okay, go ahead.
So because Australia is part of the Western world, we share a culture, right? We have what we call Western culture, right? And we share
Mhm,
that with Australia, with the UK, even with non-English speaking countries like Germany and France and Spain and Italy. And we share this common what we call Western culture, right?
okay,
And the one thing that's unique, again, mentioned this yesterday, what's unique about America is our constitutional republic. It is absolutely backwards and upside down from what everyone else has, right?
mhm,
So when the Australian government stepped in a few weeks ago and said, "Yeah, we're taking over all the public utilities," nobody can really do anything to stop that, right? If they want
yeah,
to say, "Okay, yeah, we gave you this right, right? You have this right because we gave it to you. We're taking that away," and nobody can really say anything about it. So that's how the Western world is structured. Like it's not like our constitutional republic, you know. Whereas again, most
mhm,
Americans think they got the rights from the Constitution because they understand very little to nothing about history, but they didn't. Okay. And because they
mhm,
didn't get those rights, because those rights are acknowledged as being inherent in you as a human being, that they can never be taken away, right? That the government, in fact, that was the restriction. The Bill of Rights was to restrict the government, that you can never impede these rights of the people that they have inherently. They are born and inherently have these rights as
mhm,
human beings. These are rights they always have. No other country structures it that way. And then, we talked yesterday about the real top-down structure of people at the top, then the counties, then the states, then the federal government. Our country's the only one structured that way. Okay?
right,
You go into Australia and it's a top down from the federal down, right? people at the bottom. Same with the UK,
Mhm.
same with Canada, same with Germany, same with France, same with Italy, same with Spain, same with Portugal. Like their system there is upside down and backwards from ours. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's why I'm telling you so many people are watching America because they realize if we go down to tyranny, they're screwed. Because it's also, if you look at history in the last 100 years, we've ensured and been the guarantors of their wealth, of their prosperity, of their
Mhm.
progress, of their
Mhm.
trade networks. Like it's because of the US Navy that we have a global distribution system, right?
Mhm.
Without
Mhm.
the US Navy, piracy wouldn't be any different than it was in the 16 1700s. Like you would be losing massive cargo ships all the time to pirates, and you would have countries fighting amongst each other. And one of the things that countries do when they fight each other is blow up cargo ships because that hurts your enemy. In
Mhm.
fact, during the Iran Iraq war back in the late 70s, early 80s, they they destroyed, I believe it was only a handful of cargo ships, right, in the Persian Gulf. It almost collapsed the global financial system because we were so used to not having to worry about that the insurance companies hadn't had to pay out a claim of losing a cargo ship in forever because the US Navy was there guaranteeing that everyone could sail around the world with their cargo ships without worrying about being attacked, without worrying about pirates, without worrying about being sunk. And so, but if you're talking about a cargo ship, you're talking about a lot of things to insure, right? You're talking about these multi-million, multi-billion-dollar policies. And if all of a sudden you've got to pay out 12 multi-billion-dollar policies, and when you understand how our financial networks are connected, how the insurance companies are connected to the bonding companies, are connected to the various markets, like you realize that that was a very delicate time, that very easily the the financial systems of the world could have collapsed because of a war between Iraq and Iran, you know. And
And then
and so that's something that we've taken for granted, that all
right.
countries have taken for granted, that we've had this free flow of trade that has
Mhm.
allowed all
Mhm.
countries to prosper
Mhm.
and to
Mhm.
become wealthy and to
Mhm.
focus on other things. Like
Mhm.
Australia doesn't have much in the way of a navy because they don't need one because of the
Mhm.
US Navy. So
Mhm.
they didn't have to put time and effort and resources into building a navy. And in the long run, that is going to, that's why I said, when we look at what's on the horizon for the world civilization, the US is in the best position because we have all those things and nobody else really does, or at
Right.
least not many. Like Russia
Uh-huh.
will be okay. They're not going to fare as well as we are.
Uh-huh.
China's going to have it really bad, even though they have a strong infrastructure and they have a navy and all these other things, just because they messed around with their population. They did the one child thing. They were sterilizing their population. They were forcing abortions on women. Like they've they've done more damage to their population that their population will collapse the hardest, and it will destroy their civilization because their civilization is already tenuous as it
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
because it's this mix of communism and capitalism, right? So it's
Mhm.
already a questionable situation. You have a collapse in population and they're done. There will be no more China.
That's crazy. It's like happening everywhere. Let's see. The Linga says the globalist scum tried to starve us out and make us freeze. The
Yeah,
government are just the prison guards who is running the prison. Let's see what else he says. I would agree with that. China also did this in the 1400s, the largest navy in the world. And I don't know
yep,
what he, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think, and a lot of, so because a lot of my listeners, these, so mostly I talk about, right, I was telling you spiritual alchemy and kind of transcending the narrative and looking at it from the macrocosm really, which I like because it's like now you're like talking about the microcosm, like how is this playing out, in the real world? Like how does it, like I can kind of speak to that, but I can't speak politics. I can't speak, what's going on with our navies and our I don't know all that stuff. Like I just don't know it. Um, but I think a lot of people were like, "Well, what do we do?" Especially during the pandemic, right? And all this, and I had people from other countries coming on and asking me, and I'm like, I honestly don't know. The one thing I can tell you to do is prepare. Just learn how to grow food. No, you know what I mean? The basic stuff because you need to eat. Um,
Right.
and those kind of things, and that's I think that was the big thing. People were like, "Well, do I move away? Do I get the shot? Do I?" Some people were like freaking out, like, "I don't know what to do." And I'm like, "You've got to do what you've got to do to survive, especially if you have a family, right?" And
Yeah.
what does that look like? So I think it's just it's crazy what's going on, and I don't think, and that I think that's what it is. It's like I'm trying to get people to understand something's happening. Please wake up. Please figure it out. I don't know how to organize people. Like I'm not one of these people who goes to, like, I could go to a rally, great, but I'm not good at organizing people together. Like that's not my strength. It's
Right.
true. I'm just going to
Right.
admit it. So, I could podcast, I could write, and those are the skills that I have. I also can do kung fu if I need to defend myself. I don't know if that won't defend myself against a gun, but at least I won't run out of bullets or whatever. But it's like, I don't know, prepare yourself for what's to come, and people in other countries, I just feel it's it's scary because I had a couple of people from Australia actually reach out. Do you have any advice for them that you could think of? Like any.
Specifically Australians. I here's the thing about Australians, and I don't
Mhm,
know why it hasn't been manifesting more, but they're actually, as far as their like their way, their hearts, right, and where they're
uh-huh,
at, uh, they're more like Americans than any other Western country in that they are fervent believers in personal freedom, right?
mhm, mhm.
They typically they wouldn't just go along with things, but I would say that about Americans, and like look at the pandemic. All these Americans just like, yes, yes,
I know.
you know, accepting everything. So I could see that again, it's driven by fear, but Australians will fare better than most in Western culture because they kind of have that that part of them that is like hardy, that is like I'm going to stand up, I'm going to work for it, I'm going to
Mhm,
resist. Like they have that within their spirit. Like if there is a common uh, way of being, right,
uh-huh,
among Australians, it's that
mhm.
toughness that we recognize in Americans. They have that, right? They
Yeah,
have that fortitude, right? That spiritual fortitude
uh-huh,
uh, that
yeah.
will
He's
that
like,
will
"We are
benefit them.
resilient."
Yeah, absolutely. That will be a benefit for them. Whereas, a lot of other
Yes,
Western countries who don't have that, it's just going to be mush, right? It's just going to be collapse. So I think Australians are probably in a better position than most Western countries. Now, here's the thing: they don't really, and remember we were talking about like the how Egypt made it through the Bronze Age collapse, right? They were isolated,
mhm,
and
mhm,
that's again another
mhm,
thing that Australia kind of has going for it. It's an island, so it's
mhm.
isolated, so it's kind of protected. You don't have to worry about roving bands, over the landmass.
Right,
You're isolated, so you're pretty well insulated and protected in that sense. So
okay.
they're going to be better off. It's not going to be good, but again, I guess I want to bring this back to, because I don't want to be black pilling everyone. I don't want everybody like, oh yeah, you're all screwed. Give up now. Like that's. I don't see it that way. I really don't. I'm just very. I'm practical about it. Like I make my assessments. Like, okay, yeah, this is gonna happen. Mathematically, this is gonna happen. And because we've got these people over here that are pushing to make it happen, it's gonna happen sooner.
Mhm,
And so it's just practicality. I'm just like looking at the numbers, looking at what's happening, looking at how culture and society is reacting. Like to me it's like these are foregone conclusions, but there's also something else that I see, and it's like, yes, things will be different,
uh-huh,
but I feel we're on the precipice now. We're going to go into the archetype, so it's leaning more into the spiritual here, right? um the way I
uh-huh, uh-huh,
see
go
it
ahead.
culturally,
Mhm,
as a culture, as a society, we are on the precipice of a dark night of the soul as a culture. See, not
Uh-huh.
only do we enter into these archetype uh, points as individuals, right? We don't only enter a dark night of the soul as an individual, we enter a dark night
Yeah.
of us of the soul as a culture, as a society.
Uh-huh.
And that's what we're
Yeah.
doing. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
shit's gonna get bad and it's gonna get worse than it is
Right.
now, right? But
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing. Like
Yeah.
what what's the great possibility and opportunity we have in the dark night of the soul, and it's the realignment of the true self, the
Yeah.
authentic self with your principles.
Right.
We were talking yesterday about this relativism and how it's destroyed any sense of morality within our culture. Well,
Mhm.
that can be alleviated through a dark night of the soul as a culture, as a society, where we get in tune with the
Mhm.
authentic identity of
Mhm.
our society, of our culture. What is it really? Like, look at all these people running around. Like, again, they don't recognize that we're in this anomalous bubble in history where it's like the best it's ever been, and everyone's bitching and complaining.
Yep.
Like, and it's like,
Uh-huh.
so
Mhm.
there will be this re-identification, right, of like what is great and what we can do and what our principles are. That's
Yeah.
what happens in a dark night of the soul.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at all this and I'm actually excited about it. So
Yeah.
I don't take even my own kind of assessments of where we're going and where we're heading. I don't look at that as like negative. I look at it as
Mhm.
like, wow,
Mhm.
amazing opportunity we're heading into.
Right. And hopefully, as we exit the dark night of the soul, people have learned.
Well,
Um,
again, you're gonna so I think you also have to recognize there will be this great conflict because
oh,
there
for
are
sure.
these forces
Of
that
course.
want to control, they want to dominate, they want to eliminate, like 90% of the population. So we will be at contention with that
Yeah.
because, like I said, it's a mathematical certainty that we're
Yep.
heading there without these people's influence. So the fact that these people are trying to capitalize on this mathematical certainty in a way that only benefits them, they come from a very selfish mindset, very greedy,
Yeah.
but most of all, very fearful. They are driven by
Oh,
fear.
for sure. This, yes.
That's why they're trying, that's why they
Yeah.
want everyone else to be
Yep.
afraid
Yep.
because
Exactly.
they're terrified. And so
Yep.
they're trying to push fear porn on everyone and make everyone so afraid because they're terrified and
I
they
know.
don't get it. Why aren't you scared? Like they are terrified, so they want everyone else to be terrified, and so they're pushing terror on everyone.
Exactly. So check this out. This will probably trip you out. So one of my professors was telling us that these sort of elite people went to a friend of his who's a professor, and I can't remember what he was doing research in, but it was kind of like, what's to come, all that kind of stuff. And they went to him and they said, what should we do when the big event happens, like what? And he and he they didn't like the answer that he gave them. He said, right now the world needs kindness and compassion, and for us to um you know um lift people up. And they didn't want to hear that because it was like control, like they just wanted control. So obviously the guy didn't give them the answer that they wanted, but that's
Right.
exactly what it was. They were fearful that they were going to lose the quote unquote power and
Yeah.
control that they hold. And they didn't like the answer. He didn't like the answer. And he's like,
Right.
that's what the world needs right now. Like that's what, if you treat people good and you're kind and you're, then it'll change things. But that's not what we see, right? We see people fighting with each other, and oh my God, you say one comment and people explode on you. And, there's no grounded arguments. Like you said, nobody's doing it. They just, yeah, it's their own narrative, it's their own truth. Now, it's good to have your own authentic truth when your principles and values align with, I feel, when they align with nature and law and natural law, and you're not doing harm. You're here to do good, and you're here to live in harmony with life itself. But, you know, it's ego gets in the way, of course, and it's like, well, I'm right and people should be doing it this way. And then we end up with all this craziness. So, but these people are afraid, and I felt it, and I can see it, and I've said it over and over again. They're afraid. They're afraid, and
Yeah.
there's more of us than them, and that makes them freak out. And now we're talking about these issues, whereas I don't know, in the past, I'm sure people did, but now everybody can broadcast. I mean, we're broadcasting now and talking about the issues. And now it's like, oh shit, like maybe they're kind of like waking up and doing some critical thinking, and they're like, hell no, that's not what we want. Our agenda says this. And also to that point, in the dark night of the soul, or the transition between the two, is that people want to hold on to the old narrative. They're fighting for that old system to stay in place when it's not going to. It's like they're wanting to hold on to these ideas, and I think that's why they're trying to control how it breaks down, because they're like, if we control how it breaks down, then we can control how it we build it back up. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
they're
Yeah.
if you look at, like, they're broadcasting what they're doing as well,
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
the World
Yeah.
Economic Forum and the
Yeah, yeah,
Great
yeah.
Reset.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
laying it out, like, here's
Yeah.
what we're gonna do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they are intent on maintaining control.
Uh-huh.
And again, there's of course the population control element, which
Mhm.
again you should know about, you should learn about, you should see the history of it, um, because then you can understand. Again, it's driven by fear.
Yep.
They justify it through neo-Malthusianism, and this this is a key part that
Mhm.
it has been justified. Don't think that they don't have and haven't had for over 60 years worldwide programs that are funded by, authorized by these global
Oops, you're
entities.
cut off, Brandon.
That's where that they have been doing this now
Uh-huh.
for a long time. And if you're unaware of it, then when you look at things like, why do these pharmaceuticals or environmental elements have these impacts on the human body, and why aren't we doing anything about it? Well, because it's already been justified. Like, making you infertile is
Mhm.
justified. Making you not able to reproduce is justified. Like, they have fully justified all of this into a worldwide program. Like, taking the
Right.
population down. And again, it's fear, right? If when they already saw, the writing was already on the wall. The it was a mathematical certainty, and they've known about this mathematical certainty since the 80s, right? Because we
Uh-huh.
had this huge, with the baby boomers, we had this huge population explosion. It drove this innovation, this growth of industry, this thriving internationally, right, between all countries. This
Mhm.
was all driven by that. And the math, when you look at the numbers, you're like, okay, yes, this is coming to an end. Here's where it all falls apart. Like, they knew that, right? And before, it would have been, okay, things are going to start to go bad around, 2025, 2030. But again, because their agenda is to get this ball rolling sooner rather than later,
Mhm.
they're they've pushed us into, like, the COVID lockdowns and things like that, which are
Mhm.
only exacerbating the problem, right?
Mhm.
And there may be other things that they're pushing and trying to get the ball rolling on, like if you look at
Mhm.
humans
Mhm.
and their reproduction, they we by choice are reproducing less. But again,
Mhm.
if there's an exacerbation by introducing something into the environment, introducing things into your foods, introducing things into maybe your vaccines or something like that, that will also make you unable to have children, well, that's justified under
Mhm.
neo-Malthusianism. And so it's like these things are mathematical certainties already. The population
Mhm.
collapse was already a mathematical certainty. The
Right.
collapse of the civilized world as we know it was already a mathematical certainty, but they're pushing it. you know, because,
Yes.
like you said, in order, like, their main concern being control and power over others, is like, we need a manageable population, right?
Yep.
If
Yep.
everything
Yep.
collapses and we've got
Yep.
7 billion people, we're in trouble.
Yep.
you know,
Yep. Yep.
have you ever tried to herd 7 billion cats? It's not going to work. Um, because that's what controlling human beings is like. You know what I mean? We're like cats in that fashion. It's like we kind of want to just do our own thing, and we're actually if things start collapsing, you start to lose your most effective tools in controlling people, like media, right?
Yep.
These things will start to break down and they'll start to have less and less influence. So it's like, okay, we need to eliminate a large part of the population. And again, this isn't conspiracy theory. I've dug up over 60 years worth of population control programs that
Yep.
have been fully justified and talked about and implemented all over the world. Like these aren't conspiracy theories. These are
I
programs
trust
that are
me,
in
I don't think
place.
they are. I don't think they're conspiracy theories. I promise you. I have a guy who goes into conspiracy theories a lot. I was like, man, I told him to get on here to listen. Hopefully he'll listen eventually. But he has a lot of questions, and no, it is programs, and they do. I mean, I tell people, listen to the words like programming. Everything is about a program. They're programming us for this, they're programming us for that. They're programming us to believe this. The whole COVID thing was a program. They put it on programs on TV. So it was like this big operation to, yeah, get us to submit to their whatever agendas, whatever.
Right.
So, and it is control, and it is fear, and the population control as well. But for me, I'm like, you know what? It's all, and you can even see it. And here's my thing. How can people not see it? I mean, they're doing some ridiculous, off the wall, out of control. I mean, they're so afraid that they're doing things that are just, I have to laugh. I'm like laughing at them. I'm like, really? Like this like this is your way of actually trying to control. Like, if people can't see the ridiculousness of their actions, I mean, there's a problem. There's a problem with the human or maybe people are just so programmed or so comfortable that they don't give a shit, right? It's not affecting them right in the
No,
immediate.
I think it's a willful blindness to try to stay comfortable.
Okay, yeah. And that would
People
make
don't
sense.
want to
Yes.
see. Yeah, people
Yeah.
don't want to see
Yeah.
what's happening.
Yeah. I'm like, how can you not? They're acting ridiculous. I mean, the stuff that they're doing is like, really?
It's
Like,
cartoonish
it's
to bring it back to a dream.
cartoonish. It's totally cartoonish. And I'm like, wow, even commercials, like, literally, okay, I don't watch TV. Every once in a while, I'll watch a series, but sometimes they have commercials on, right? And I'm like, these commercials, I'm like, are people listening to the words that are coming? I mean, I'm like, my jaw is, I drop. I'm like, really? Like, do people buy into this, or do they just zone out about what they're actually saying? A lot of like especially the pharmaceutical stuff, right? Like,
Yeah,
how can you not see they're feeding us poison? Like, and
yeah.
you're going to go to your doctor and take that pill? I don't get it. I don't understand how people are not listening. Are they not listening? Are they zoned out? Are they zombified?
People hear what they want to hear. That
Apparently.
and what they want to hear is what makes them comfortable, right? So yeah, you do have basically ignorance, right? So it's
Oh my,
ignorance. People are ignoring the obvious signs all around them and what's happening. Uh, I don't have any form of television, and the only time I get to see it is at the ranch, right? So I'll be sitting there with Leroy watching television, and what comes on is like what you said. I'm just like I'm blown away by it. I'm like,
it's
wow, this is
crazy,
like
right?
heavy programming, and and it, it blows me away that I'm like, wow, you have this thing on every day, like no wonder people are in the mental state that they're in. They have these idiot boxes on all day long,
I
you
know,
know,
it's
and it's
crazy.
just it's influencing them. And like, I mean, I've just heard some of the most ridiculous, like people that are under the influence of the idiot box. I hear the most ridiculous things come out of their mouths that has clearly had no kind of critical thinking, no kind of research. No, they haven't looked into anything that's coming out of their mouth.
Right.
And I'm just like, yeah, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Do you understand basic economics? You do understand supply and demand, right? And then I have to break down like simple concepts
Right.
that, like, look, your narrative is just false, patently false, and there's nothing supporting it. Right now, what you're seeing, like, if let's say we're talking about gas prices, right? And someone says, "Oh, it's because of the corporations, the the petroleum companies," and I'm like, No, it's because uh, your president cut off oil pipelines that made us self-sufficient and we didn't need foreign oil. He cut those he shut those down, and then he cut off the other big supplier in the world, Russia, from supplying us oil. Now, which is funny, I find this so hypocritical. What if every time we went into a war skirmish, like when we went into Iraq or when we went into Afghanistan, what if everyone around the world said we're not buying American stuff anymore? You know, now that would have impacted us greatly, but it would have impacted them too. Like
Exactly.
it's just dumb. Like, and so it's like it's a supply and demand. When you have a much higher demand than you have supply, the price goes up. And we also have inflation. So the value of our dollar is also going down at the
I
same time.
know. I
So
know.
it's like if you can't if you don't understand these simple economic principles, and you're just going to buy into a narrative like, oh, it's the CEO's fault. No, it's not. The CEO has nothing to do with it. He's responding to the market. That's what a good CEO does. Like you, you have to price your product based on your supply and the demand. That's
Yep.
what a market is.
Okay, let's talk about this real quick, the dollar, because and then maybe you have some insight on this as well. Okay, so the dollar, obviously it's obvious, right? It's it's going down. And I obviously there are, I don't know, but I foresee that the currency is going to shift and change, eventually. What do you think, like, what is your, do you have foresight on it, or and Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff? Do you have any
Well,
insight?
in my opinion, in my assessment, the only sustainable economic system we should entertain as the people
Uh-huh.
is a decentralized cryptocurrency based system.
Okay.
That to me is that's the only thing that we can have that will guarantee a prosperous future for us.
Okay.
Whenever you put a small group of people in charge of your
Yeah.
currency, it ends badly. In fact, that was the one thing our founding fathers said. Now I'm going to paraphrase and I'm going to curse. They said, "Don't fuck this up. Don't give banks control of your money. Don't give the bankers, the international bankers, control of your money." Why would they say that?
Well,
What did they
yeah.
know? What did they foresee? And how soon did we give over control? And this is the big problem. And
Uh-huh.
even if it was still maintained by the US Treasury and everything else, let's say it was only Congress had the power to coin money, um, then we wouldn't be in much better situation because there would still be centralization. And through centralization, you can always influence and control. So the
Mm,
international bankers would have exerted their influence and control in some way, shape, or form, whether it be just buying off the Treasury Department, buying off politicians, whatever. They could have done it anyways because it was centralized.
mhm.
The beauty of a decentralized system is that no one controls it,
Right.
and the value of your currency is purely based on supply and demand. And like if we use Bitcoin as an example, where it's a limited supply, there are
Right.
only ever 21 million. So its value will only ever increase over time because demand will always be increasing as commerce moves, right? So
Okay.
as more commerce shifts over to the currency, as more people demand it, the value will always increase because the the supply, right? This is simple market dynamics. The supply is set.
Right.
Now, why are we experiencing inflation right now? Because we've put ridiculous amounts of dollars into circulation.
Yep.
Okay, we just keep dumping money, dumping money. And what, again, it's simple market dynamics,
Right.
supply and demand. When
Right.
you have this huge supply and the demand hasn't changed, the value goes down. And that's true for currency just like it is for any other commodity or product, right?
Right.
Whether you're talking about dollars or apples. If you've got 10 billion apples, but only a demand for 1 million, they're going to be really, really cheap,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
that's what's happening to the dollar. You have just way too many dollars in circulation, way too easy for people to get. They're just getting handouts, getting handouts, getting handouts, right? Nobody's has to
Mhm.
work for it, so they're not working for it. And so you've now created a supply demand problem, right? And this creates the inflation that we're experiencing.
Right.
So I'm not concerning myself with their plans, right? Whether it's the
Sure.
Klaus Schwab and his cronies at the World Economic Forum, or the international bankers, whoever's plan, uh, and whatever their plan is, it's not for our benefit,
Right.
whatever it is.
Oh,
It never has
absolutely.
been.
No. Yeah,
you
no.
know, so
They don't give
whatever
a
the
shit about me.
next, yeah, whatever the next thing might be, it's not
Uh-huh.
going to work out for us in the end unless we, the people, and this is something we could do tomorrow. All the people tomorrow could go, I'm done with Federal Reserve notes. I'm done with US dollars. I'm not going to use them anymore. I will demand payment in Bitcoin for my services, for my products, and I will only pay for products and services with Bitcoin, right? If we all did that tomorrow, the bankers and their control over our media, their control over our politicians, their control over us would disappear. We have given them control because we willingly accept their fiat currency. We willingly use it. We willingly put value in it. If there was zero demand for the dollar, what would the value be? It would be
Zero.
zero.
Yep. So, okay, so that makes sense. And so Bitcoin, um, so I would have seen with the trends, right? Because it was going up, 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 up. And then I saw it drop, and I'm like, are people, I'm just thinking, I don't know exactly what's happening because I don't follow like markets and stuff like that. I just kind of like thinking, well, we're right now, people are wanting dollars to buy things. So did it drop? Do you think it dropped because they were taking out their Bitcoin and exchanging them for dollars?
Well, you got to remember the banks are now involved in the cryptocurrency markets,
Okay.
right? So they're trying to manipulate the cryptocurrency markets like they manipulate everything else. So
Okay.
they'll buy in mass and they'll sell in mass, and this can have these dramatic fluctuations in the pricing and value of the Bitcoin, because if they dump a whole bunch on the market, you now have this huge supply, not much demand, the value goes down. If they
Right.
buy it all up, you now have less supply, more demand, and the value goes up, right?
Right.
But here's the thing, I don't look at cryptocurrency as a stock or a commodity to earn me more dollars. I look at it as like I'm replacing my dollars with it. I
Uh-huh.
don't want dollars. I want Bitcoins.
Got
You
it.
see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because that, to me, that is the future of currency. Whether
Okay.
or not the rest of the world buys in, I will always create a private market for myself to engage and contract in. Now, again, I do have an advantage because I'm one of those people who creates business for themselves. So
Right.
I can demand payment in Bitcoin. And
Okay.
I can, and there's no shortage of services and goods that I can acquire with Bitcoin. So that's something I can do, and that I have, through the work that I've done to be independent, allows me to do that. Whereas someone who's completely dependent as an employee, they don't have that,
Yeah.
right? Especially if they
Definitely.
don't have a unique skill or
Sure.
a high level of skill where they can say, you know what, this is the terms of my contract with you. Now, here's the thing, with this labor collapse happening, that power is going to return to the people,
Right.
because it's like now the people will be highly valued commodities, because it's like, look, you're losing all the people. There are no people to fill all these roles. So if you want me to fill this role, here are my demands.
Okay. That's true. That's a good
So
way
the
to look at
labor
it.
is going to yeah, the laborers
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
are going to control the future market of labor, because
So it's like
they're like,
educating
I
them.
can work wherever I want. I can, I can work anywhere. What if you want me to work for you? Here's the demands I have, and it'll be a complete shift. Again, it's basic market dynamics, supply and demand.
Right.
When the demand for for labor is higher than the supply of labor, well, then the laborer has all the power in the relationship, because
So
their
then it's
labor
like,
becomes more and more valuable.
so you think the market will ever truly shift to Bitcoin, period, and then money will go
I'm
away? Or
hopeful. I'm
uh-huh.
hopeful. I like I said, it's the only future we have. If we want to get out from under the control of the central bankers,
Yeah.
I'll call it the banking cabal. If we ever want to get out from under their control, it's something we have to look at. And it's the only thing we can rely. It's a trustless system.
Yeah.
It's decentralized. No one controls it. It's trustless. We don't have to rely on a small group of people not being corrupt. Whereas that's the only way a centralized currency works is if the people controlling it are actually good people
Right.
making decisions for what's best for the economy and the people. We've never had that.
Yeah.
That's never been a thing. Okay. They've only ever made choices and decisions that benefit them. Right.
Yeah.
So that's not something we can rely upon. You know,
We'll just cross our fingers and hope. Yeah, right.
yeah, exactly.
Not gonna happen. Yeah, because I did actually decide to do Bitcoin before because I did a little bit of research um and understanding on it, and I don't know a lot about it, but I did understand that like there's these things called the halvings anyway, where it's like, and I don't know how exactly how it works, but I do know that at the halvings, if you put your money in at that time, there's usually like a minor drop and then an increase, and that's usually how it's gone and how it's trended. I'm not saying it's always going to be that way, and I tried it and it was actually good timing for me. Because and I was it's kind of in a way too, it felt like I felt like I had empowered myself because it was like I'm making these decisions, and if I make this decision to get Bitcoin and I lose it, well, it's on me. You know what I mean? But if somebody else is making bad decisions with my money and investing it incorrectly and then it goes away, well, I don't really have, I mean, I, what am I going to do? I can't, you know what I mean? I'm going to feel like helpless instead of like empowered. Even though
Right.
both can get lost, I'd rather be the one who makes the decision and has that power,
Right.
for so yeah, and I kind of felt like that. But in terms of like the different coins, you know, I don't have very much information on other coins, but I think it's something that's important.
I again, it's the only don't lose don't lose the forest through the trees, right?
Yes,
It's all the other coins are meaningless. People are treating it. You got to look at how other people are looking at it. They're looking at it as like something to make more dollars from,
right,
right? So they're
right, right, right,
looking at it like stock, like
right.
some commodity trade, right?
Sure.
They're looking to earn more dollars with it. Okay. And so, yeah, they'll speculate on all these other currencies, which are all meaningless, unless there is a technology, meaning something that distinguishes that particular cryptocurrency and that the specific technology that it incorporates gives it value as a currency. Okay.
Okay.
So, and again, I'm not, I wouldn't suggest anyone necessarily go down that path because again, I, the way I approach Bitcoin is acquire. That's
Uh-huh.
my approach.
Mhm.
Acquire, buy more, buy
Mhm.
more, buy
Mhm.
more. You know, when the price goes down,
Sure.
awesome. I'm getting it cheaper. Buy more, buy
Yeah.
more. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
like, oh, buy low, sell high. Nope. I don't care about freaking dollars. I
Right.
don't want
Sure.
dollars. You know, like if I'm going to buy anything with crypto, it'll be gold or silver. You know, like that's what I'll buy with crypto.
Okay.
And again, I'm not going to buy a lot of it because then it becomes hard to move around
Yeah.
and keep secure. You know what I mean? Like, it's like to me, crypto is the easiest thing because for one, it's absolutely secure. When you
Uh-huh.
understand the technology and you understand how to secure your wallets and you keep your wallets offline, you there no one can ever take it from you. Nobody has that power, you
I
know,
know,
whereas
and that's
there
it.
is no other system that's that secure.
I have the okay, so here's my thing because I probably should transfer it over, but I have I'm on Coinbase, okay, but
Which
I
is an
do have
online wallet.
I know, but I do have a Firefox, or what is it called? Foxfire? What is the one where it's encrypted and you store it? Firefox? No,
There's
that
many.
was
There's
that
there's
was a ninja.
Yeah, no,
That was a
that's a browser.
that
That's a
was a
browser.
search engine browser. It was called dang. what's the name of it? I bought
There,
it.
there's a couple. There's a couple. I know Gingy has one of them. Again, I don't need those. Like I know how to encrypt. So
Oh,
I
well,
encrypt
excuse me,
my
Mr.
wallet files and everything else, and I just keep them on thumb drives. I just keep them on thumb drives and in various other locations.
Brandon.
So
I know how to encrypt. Well, not all of us know how to encrypt. um,
But I
yeah,
do know that there are hardware devices that claim that.
yes,
Again,
yes.
I don't necessarily trust proprietary technologies. Like the wallet I use or the wallet client I use is the open source Bitcoin wallet. Like
Okay,
that's all I use. I don't use any proprietary software. And then what I do is not only is the spending on the wallet protected with a 32 character passphrase, but I also encrypt the files that have the wallet in it, all of my, except for the blockchain itself. I'm not going to encrypt the blockchain. And then I store it on a thumb drive. And then I store it on multiple thumb drives. And then I store it in remote locations because I know, for one, you can't break that encryption. With the type of encryption I'm using, you won't be able to break it, and I can put it all over the place. And if something goes wrong, I will always have access to
okay,
these encrypted files. And then
right.
I even send thumb drives out to people. I'm like, hey, save this for me somewhere. Like, so it's like
Okay.
I've got my Bitcoin wallet distributed all over the world,
Oh,
and but nobody could get into it but me.
okay. So when are you going to do that service for me?
Yeah, not likely. I mean, I'll tell you what, as soon as you get a wallet with like 10, 20 Bitcoins in it, then I might help you out. I'll form a trust for you.
um, yeah, I think so. I think that's good, and I'm slowly. Sometimes I'm a slow mover on this stuff, especially technology. I kind of move slow. I'm not always the one at the head of the curve with technology stuff and the way it's going, but um I do know and feel as a clairvoyant the energy shifts in things. And when I'm like, okay, this is something that I need to pay attention to. Like I know when I need to pay attention to something. So I did start to, well, I was like, here, just Bitcoin. And I don't mess with other coins because I don't know what they are. I mean, I understand, Bitcoin a little bit and what it is. And I know you had talked about it. And it was crazy because at the time, so I knew about Bitcoin before you had talked about it when we were in class, but then you brought it up when we were taking your courses or whatever. And I think at the time it was like $250 per
Yep.
coin.
And remember, I told you it would hit
Yeah.
50,000 within the next couple years.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
those who believed me and bought in are millionaires. Those who didn't believe me and didn't buy in are kicking themselves in the ass and saying, why didn't I listen to Brandon when he was telling us to buy it at $200?
I know. I know. It was, and I had heard about it before, but I just didn't know enough. You know what I mean? My thing was like I don't know enough about, like, I just, and I didn't educate myself on it, but then I was kind of like the late person to jump on. I mean, it wasn't too bad when I jumped on as well. I'm not a million trillionaire or whatever, which is fine, but at least I have an understanding of how it works. And yes, and I think you're right. Acquiring it is important because I haven't, like, well, let me just take it out, or let me, oh, I see it's gone. I'm just like, no. And I don't even know how to use it at this point. It's just kind of sitting there for right now because I'm like, I don't know what to do um
Right. Which is,
with it.
again, that's better. If
Yeah.
you, all you need to understand is how to get it to your wallet, how to lock your wallet, and how to safely store your wallet. That's all you need to know. If you know those things and how to open it back up so that you can get access to your wallet again, learn that and then
Okay.
just acquire it. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like then it's
Yep.
just about acquiring. Now here's the thing, like people like will ask, well, why don't you do this? Like they'll ask, well, why don't you invest in, mutual funds or stocks or bonds or anything like that? And for me, it's very simple. Like the writing's on the wall. Like economies will be collapsing, right?
Right.
Um, Anything and everything in the markets at that time will be completely worthless. yes, the possibility that we won't even have computer technology, so Bitcoin becomes worthless, is also there.
Yep.
That's also a very real possibility.
Yep.
Here's the thing. If that happens, the only thing that will have value is your skill set.
Absolutely.
That's what will be valuable. So in
Yep.
reality, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to put it all in Bitcoin. That's what I'm betting on. But the reality is, like, even gold and silver, when everyone's concern is shelter and food, how
Yeah.
much
They
is
don't
your
care.
gold and silver going to be worth?
Yeah. Nothing. Absolutely
It's going to be
nothing.
worth nothing.
Yeah.
So in reality, it will be your skill set. So if anything, if you're looking at like, yeah, things may get bad, well, start to work on your skill set. You know,
Okay.
like you were saying, start to learn how to grow food, start to learn how to build things. So that's all valuable skills. I'm fortunate. I got engineering, I got building, I've got tech, like if we do still have technology, I've got an awesome technology skill set.
Yeah.
um, I know how to I know how to survive in the wilderness, and so these are things that I see as important aspects of a skill set to have. And if all goes to hell, I have very valuable skill sets, and that
Yes.
will be the currency of
Uh-huh.
if we
Yep.
experience collapse. Those will be the most valuable currencies, will be your skill set.
I
It
agree.
won't
And
be
that's
gold, it won't be silver, it definitely ain't going to be your US dollars.
it. It reminds me of that scene in Titanic where the guy's like trying to give him money to get in the boat, and he just like he hits his money. He's like, "You dumbass, we're gonna die. Like your money is meaningless right now. Get it out of my face." You know what I mean? And it's true. You can't eat money.
Yeah.
And so right. And I think, and then it's funny too because Katrina, you remember Katrina? Anyway, she who I happen to
Oh,
be.
that's actually, yeah. Now it's funny. As soon as you said it, I was thinking of the hurricane, but I'm like, oh, you mean the other hurricane? Okay.
She is a hurricane. She's funny though. She's always like when the zombie apocalypse happens, she's already like preparing herself for how she's gonna go down. She's like, and she did say, and she's pretty smart, she's pretty intuitive. She's like, your skills are going to be important. What do you have to trade in skills? And I'm like, yeah, it's
Yep.
true. What skills do you have? Because people aren't going to just let you in. If like my friend Vanessa, my roommate that I live with, which she's a badass to be honest with you, but she is a paramedic, a flight paramedic, one of the only flight paramedics in the state, and one who flies between different places in New Mexico, or not New Mexico, actually the US. And because she works for UNM, so they go all over. Anyway, if there was somebody who was injured or hurt, you're gonna want her there. You know what I mean? She
Right.
knows what to do. And so so we kind of laugh because we're like, well, we have our crew of what we're gonna do, right? They're like, Natalie, be in charge of the the marshal stuff. Anyway, we just laugh, but we're all looking at like, what are the skills that we bring, right? Can we grow food? Can we? Because that's what it'll take. So if shit goes down in a handbasket, those are like the people you want to align yourself with. That's how
Right.
I feel.
And if there's anyone who feels like they don't have any marketable skill, like there's things that you can, like right now you still have access to the internet. There are things you can learn that will be tremendously valuable if things happen the way, that we're describing.
Yes.
Like herbalist. If you can identify plants
Oh yeah.
and understand how to treat people using various herbs and plants, and even how foods benefit the body and what
Yeah.
foods benefit the body,
Yeah.
you become invaluable
I
because
agree.
you can now heal and treat. And again, this isn't something that would require a lot of effort. In fact, I would imagine that there is a ton of material for free available on the internet.
Yes.
That like entire websites dedicated to how these herbs work, how to identify them. And in fact, you could probably find in your area, like I know there's a lot of groups
Hmm.
that like they're geared towards like a specific area, right? So like my kids are in Northern California, and I know they have these groups where it's like they go out into nature and they're like, here's the things that are around where we live. that we can use medicinally, that we can
Uh-huh.
use to treat these conditions, how to identify them. And like they just go out. It's like a nature walk,
Yep.
but they're identifying, look, you can eat this, you can eat that, you can, this plant, it benefits this condition, like so you're able to identify it, you're able to process it to get it to the point of consumability. Like that is a tremendously valuable skill that's actually not, it doesn't require a lot of effort to acquire.
I agree, and you know who's really good at that is Michael. You remember Michael Sassower, right? Do you remember
Yes, I do.
Michael? Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
Is it wasn't he the one? Was he the one who got in a motorcycle accident or something?
no, he didn't get in a motorcycle accident, we just traveled across the US on a motorcycle.
Oh, okay, okay,
There was no accident, and
okay.
yeah, but no, he's like that, and, every time I've gone to visit him or whatever, he knows he's yeah, like you said, this is super valuable because he knows what you can eat. He'll, like,
Right.
take you on a walk, and he'll be like, he's done this before. We'll sit down and we'll make a salad and we'll go walk and we'll pick stuff from nature to put in our salad. He's like, "You can eat
Right.
this, you can eat that, you can eat this, you can." I'm like, "Oh my god." He's like, "Natalie, a food shortage is a lie. There's food all around us. We just don't know. We just don't
Yeah.
it just grows naturally. That's what the earth does. It gives us back food. We just don't know what we can eat because we're so far disconnected from, the earth or whatever."
Yeah.
But
From the
he
natural
literally
world. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so I've literally like even on the side of the road, like when we were motorcycling, all that stuff, we would go and pick stuff and we put it on the plate and eat it, and I'm like, wow. And I mean, that's what he's done. He's like all about that food and having those skills as well. And I think a lot of people that were in your classes were, had some foresight obviously about, what was coming and had some tremendous skill, you know, but there wasn't this urgency to like band together and create something, which kind of sad in a way because these are the people that I feel would be could start something new, you know what I mean, or can create something that's different.
Right.
But
But they may that skill may be, best put to use
uh-huh.
in different communities. Meaning, rather than all these people who've got their shit together and got it figured out coming together, well, each of them is in a community where they can bring their own communities together because they can step into a role of leadership,
Yeah, that's true.
understanding what they understand. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
you could have one community of a bunch of people who know what the heck they're doing, or you can have communities spread out throughout the world that, because they have at least one person who understands what they're doing, they're able to thrive and able to survive and things like that.
yeah, it's true. That is true. But there's so for me, I'm like, well, what friends do I have? And so that's another thing. It's like a network of people, right? Being able to communicate, I think, and connect. I mean, I don't foresee myself if things hit the fan. I don't foresee myself being a I would migrate. I think that's what it would be for me. I would migrate and move from place to place to place like I feel like we should have been doing in the first place instead of settling in one specific location,
Well,
forever.
again, it's not a shoulda, woulda, coulda kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
That's the natural when civilization collapsed. Again, look at the Bronze Age.
Mhm.
When Bronze Age civilization collapsed, that's what happened. Everyone all of a sudden became migratory because
Mhm.
again, your food migrates. So
Right.
you're gonna
Right.
you're following your food.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's what people did. And because of the climate changes, nobody really knew where they could settle down and start farming again. And
Sure.
because there were so many people roaming, if you didn't have the capacity to defend your farming, well then people are just going to come in and take everything.
Yep.
So it was that it was what happened at the collapse of the Bronze Age. It's like you had all these roaming bands, and that's why I said Egypt kind of made it through because they were isolated. They
Okay.
had desert
Yep.
around them, so they were protected from roaming bands just coming through and eating up what they were trying to farm, right?
Right.
So they were able to make it through as a civilization because and that's the main reason, because they were able to maintain uh, the not only the crops and farming, but they were also able to maintain animal husbandry, right? So they were able to maintain, you know, cattle and sheep and things like that. So they remained a civilization. Their civilization did not break down like all the other civilizations of the Mediterranean and Europe experienced.
So if you could foresee that, where's a place what okay, I know you said Australia would be good probably to survive or
Well,
get
here's the thing about Australia. They ain't got a lot of resources. like, like there's a lot of desert in Australia. Yeah, they're isolated, so they're protected, but and their population is relatively low. Like I think the whole population of Australia is about equivalent to like Los Angeles, or maybe California. So it's relatively low, but and they do have very good areas where you could farm and you would have that, but it's not the entire continent. Like a lot of the continent isn't very useful. Now, their natives
Mhm.
understand how to utilize the land, and they still have a native population. So the natives who still understand it, because you got to realize that in reality a lot of those natives are completely part of the Australian culture now, where it's like,
Sure,
oh, you want to eat, you go to the grocery store.
sure, sure.
Like they don't know where to get food. And you got to realize with a population like that, like even though their population is only 30 million, okay, so immediately people are going to do what? Hunt kangaroo? Like
Right,
that's one of those animals that's abundant. Well, how long is it going to take before there are no more kangaroo? Not
right,
very long, you
right.
know. So you're going to decimate a lot of your resources at the beginning. If there's a collapse, there's a lot of your resources will be absolutely decimated. And it's not a great area for the roaming, right? There's not a whole lot of migratory animals to kind of follow around. So there's not a lot of that. Like I said, they've got some large animals that they could hunt and things like that. And I mean, they're surrounded by oceans, so they could definitely fish. Although I'm not sure, I haven't looked into um, their ecosystem, their ocean ecosystem, and how much they could, how much of a population could you provide for, and what coastlines would be the places to be. But as an Australian, if you are an Australian, that's things you need to look into. Like
Sure.
if I'm going to be
Absolutely.
near a coast, if I'm going to be near a coast, what are the best coastlines to be near? And what are the best states to live in? Is Queensland a good place because of the forestry or because of other elements that would make it possible for us to hunt and to grow food and things like that? Like, whereas you're not going to want to live in a particular province or state that is, mostly desert. That's
Right,
not, unless there's a river running through it and some fertile land, then that desert becomes a layer of protection around you, like Egypt.
right,
Egypt's surrounded by desert, but the fertile land that's all around the Nile provides them plenty of area to not only raise crops but to raise animals. But they're surrounded by desert, so they're isolated. No one can really get to them when you're roaming around on foot. But they've got the fertile land. So a river through a desert can be very valuable. We saw that with the Egyptians in the collapse of the Bronze Age. So that could be valuable. So it's looking at things like that, are and and then looking at the area you're in, and what are the elements that I should be looking at. Like I live in a small mountain town, and our deer are ridiculous in numbers up here. um so we've got that, and we've even got moose coming through here now, which is
oh
kind of
wow,
weird.
really?
I didn't even, yeah, I didn't know we had moose. so so that's interesting. I was like, oh, we have
There's that.
moose. Yeah. So there's, so I'm looking at all that, and it's fertile, but it's also high altitude. But that serves two purposes. It isolates in that it's like, okay, well, we don't have to worry about many people roaming into, freezing cold temperatures and high altitudes. At least during the winter, we don't have to worry about that. Um, but it also there are what you would call natural boundaries, right, and obstacles that kind of isolate you from civilization.
Yeah, it is in a
So that's
different pocket of it is an interesting kind of little area, to be honest with you. Getting
Yeah,
to it's
yeah,
not so easy as well. I agree. And there's a lot of well, you have water there. You have
yep,
a lot of
yep. We have
resources
rivers.
there.
Yep,
Uh-huh.
we have
And then
rivers and
a
streams
small
all over.
and a tiny population.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, compare relatively speaking, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, compared to Albuquerque, we have a really tiny population.
It's so
Um,
small. I was out there and I'm like, this is tiny.
right? Which
But
has
for
its
me, it
advantages and has its
was
disadvantages.
hard for me.
I definitely don't have the selection of restaurants that you have.
Which I don't even eat out anyway. I make all my food. I'm like, I don't even eat the stuff out here, so it doesn't even matter. It was just the smallness of the community, right? It was like so small that I I hate to say it, I was born in a city that was bigger than that, and I'm like, the opportunities I felt were just not as much for me. It was an interesting time. It was an
Right,
interesting time, and it was beautiful. And but I was like, man, I don't know if I fit here exactly.
right.
Either. That was a big thing. I'm glad that you've found a home there, though.
Yeah, no, I love it here. And again, I'm even like, okay, well, if stuff gets bad, where would I go from here? Because I'm also surrounded by huge national forests and stuff. So I'm like, dude, I would just head out.
I
Head out
know.
to the middle of the forest and go as deep as I could and I would be fine, because again, I've got rivers and streams, I've got deer, I've got all these things. And because this entire area, is really sparsely populated. We've got these huge forests that support a lot of animal life, but there aren't a lot of people. And not only are there not a lot of people, n- a lot of the people, or I shouldn't say a lot because I'm not even sure on the percentages, but I'm sure many of the people wouldn't even be able to hunt or
No,
anything else. You know what I
or
mean?
survive out
So
there.
right.
Yeah, like
So
out in the
it's like
wilderness.
yeah, so I don't have to worry about them as competition. At the very least, I don't have to worry about competing for food if they don't have basically if they don't have bow and arrow. Because even guns are going to become useless at some point. Y'all are going to run out of ammo and
That's
you
right.
can't make bullets.
Yep.
you know.
I'm